Hello, hello. Happy Sunday, happy Mother's Day. Oh my gosh. All right, so I am coming on today to talk about anxious attachment. So we're going to cover quite a bit of ground in this live today. So we are going to talk about what is anxious attachment? What does it look like in your life so you can start to identify if maybe that's actually the way that you are in relationships. We're going to talk about what the cause is so that you can sort of see where that might come from. And then we're going to talk about some tips and solutions and ways that you can start to work with your anxious attachment if that's what you have. Hi Brianna, how are you? Hello everybody who's joining. All right, so to start, I want to talk about what is anxious attachment so you sort of have a working definition. So this is one of the attachment styles that is related to being highly sensitive and hyper vigilant. Your attachment system is. So it's kind of ready, or you're kind of ready for the first sign of distance from your primary attachment figure. So when you're dating or in a relationship, that person. Okay, so there's a whole range of ways that this is going to manifest, and it's like on a scale, so you can have really extreme all the way down to less extreme, and there's lots of stuff in between, and it doesn't look 100% the same for everyone, but there are some really key things that are going to be the same pretty much across the board if you have anxious attachment. All right, so what does it look like? It's going to look like when you are dating or in a relationship with someone, you're going to jump to conclusions really quickly and misinterpret what is really going on with someone. It's very likely that that's going to happen. So you might say something like, "Are you mad? Are you upset at me?" Because you're so hypersensitive to any disruption to the attachment. So then you might want to jump into apologizing and trying to make it right, no matter what even. When triggered, it's not easy for you to calm down until you're able to reestablish closeness with your partner. So if you're upset, if you're worried about the danger might be happening to your attachment with that person, that maybe there's something not good between the two of you, that the relationship is at jeopardy, you will not be able to calm down easily until you hear from them, until you can establish that everything is okay. So you'll have trouble concentrating on other things while that's going on. So like being present, getting work done, even if you're friends, you can't really enjoy your time with them because in the back of your mind, that's what's there. You'll focus on how amazing this person is, almost putting them like on a pedestal above you, right? Like you just think the world of this person, no matter what anyone tells you about them. And you tend to have a way of thinking that you only have a few shots at love. And if this one doesn't work out with this person, you may never find someone else. You may be alone forever. That's sort of the fear at the back of your head. You also tend to attach pretty quickly to someone, so you fall in love pretty fast. You think he's the one pretty quickly, and you're kind of looking for marriage. You're looking for that long-term connection because you want that security, and so you just tend to fall in love pretty fast. You also tend to be afraid to let go once you're in a relationship with someone or a little further in with someone. So even though you may not be as happy as you could be, you think, but they're going to be like an amazing partner for someone else, or they're going to change for the better, or all couples have problems. And you're going to kind of talk yourself into staying in the relationship or staying in the dating situation. The reason for all of this is, like I said, you have basically a chronically activated attachment system, which means you have constant underlying anxiety and needing to know that it's secure, that you're secure, that the relationship is secure. So what that can look like is maybe he hasn't texted or called all day, and your mind starts to go into overdrive, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Very fearful about that because you need the constant reassurance that he's not going anywhere. So then you might be thinking, oh, he's angry with me, or he's losing interest in me, or he's pulling away, or I did something wrong. And then you're going to have that impulse because you need to know, you need to feel secure. Oh, maybe I should just reach out, maybe just once. Just try to establish contact. I'll just send him a small text just to try to find out what's going on. You might overthink that one text too, like, oh, it can't sound like I'm too needy or too desperate or like I care too much. And then you're going to be overthinking, what am I going to put in that text? So that then becomes a thing that you're asking someone else, what do you think? What should I do? Is this okay? Sometimes it's like you want to, you want him to think you're totally fine. So you'll send like this small little text, just like cute little thing that you've really overthought though, but you want him to not know that. Or you send him like a chapter of a book about what's going on with you. That's the other way that it could go, with all your feelings and concerns kind of just dumped there. Maybe you're afraid that you did something wrong, and then you're starting with an apology for whatever you thought it was, because then you're going to be going through the back of your mind, like, what happened, trying to figure out, like, there must be something I did, and then he doesn't respond. So, or he responds, but it's like 2 words, like, I'm good, I'm busy, playing video games, working, really, really short text. So then you're going to be like, oh my God, this is the end. It's over, he doesn't care. And then your mind's spinning. Or he just doesn't respond to that text that you sent, and now you're literally counting down the time. It's been 6 hours. He must be leaving me. He hasn't responded. Or you didn't write and you're just waiting, and now it's been 6 hours and he hasn't responded. So you have this impulse that you need to reach out, that you need that contact. You cannot enjoy or be present or get your work done until you know. So what can then happen at that point is that it's so overwhelming and so much that then you shut down. So then you start thinking, I'm over him, I'm done with him, he doesn't care, so I don't care. And you react that way to shut it down. Or you send the text that goes along the lines of, clearly, we don't want the same things, I can't do this anymore, have a good life, I wish you the best. And typically that text is still friendly and not mean, but you end it, because you've come to the determination through all your thought process that this is actually over. If you don't send that text, you're just doing further spiraling all the time. You know, I can't believe we're going to break up, going to that thought, I'm going to be alone forever. You call someone, you're sobbing, upset, and then he texts maybe 7 hours later. And it's like, I was busy at work, I didn't want to bother you, I was involved in things, let's go get dinner. And he has literally no idea what you just went through for that entire day, because you could not stop thinking about what the heck was going on with him and you. But when you get that text, you can suddenly breathe. You're like, oh my God, and you can relax. Until you hear that, you can't. And you may still be mad. We'll talk about how that might play out, but that's what you needed. So what do you do when your nervous system is activated? Some of the things that you might do tend to be called like protest behavior. So anything that you're doing to try to get connection again or to get their attention, basically by any means possible. So that could look like texting, calling, emailing multiple times. I had an ex who was extreme anxious attachment, and he called me 100 times within not a very long time, because I had actually wanted to end it with him. But that's like the over exerted attachment system, right? So it's maybe not that much, because that was extreme, but it's going to be something like that's the impulse. You may not do it, but you'll be thinking about it. Or, and this is probably you are waiting for the call or the text literally all day long. When my anxious attachment system is activated, when I was dating and hadn't done any of this work yet, I would have to take my phone around with me everywhere, waiting for that message, waiting for that text. I would be like hanging out with my family and I'd have my phone next to me and constantly be checking the screen to see if there was a message on the screen. Could not really be focused. The other thing that can happen is that you might actually withdraw because you can't handle the way it's feeling. So then you focus on something else and you completely withdraw, you turn away from the partner, typically in kind of like anger, and then you might even ignore when they do call because you've kind of closed down, but it's the same, it's still from that activated nervous system. You will often be paying attention to who's initiating contact first and how much and for how long, and there's kind of a running tally in your head about who's doing the most, right? So then you might not want to reach out. If you reached out like, you know, for the 3 times previous, you're like, okay, I need to see that he's going to reach out, because you want to know is he in this? Does he care? And so you're measuring it by, is he going to reach out? So then you just don't reach out, even though you're still thinking about him and still want to hear from him, right? Because you want to see. You actually can come off as angry sometimes, especially when he's disappeared, he comes back, or what you perceive as disappeared and comes back. You know, arms crossed, you're actually pulling away, looking away physically, you're leaving the room, but what you actually want is for him to actually sort of break through to you. You want to see how hard he's going to work for you, right? So that could even look like threatening to leave the relationship, all the while you're hoping that he's going to stop you from doing it, right? If you walk away, you slam your door, you hang up the phone, you want to see, is he going to come after me? So you're acting like you don't want him to, but really you do. Again, it's just a test. Is he really there? It can even get manipulative, and it's like dark side, where there are different ways that we're trying to see, is he really there? Is he secure, right? So sometimes we want to see if he's going to get jealous, right? So you might casually tell him, that new guy at work flirted with me today, and you just want to see how he's going to respond. Or some guy asked me out at the bar, or my ex just texted me, you know, the one who's still madly in love with me. And you just want to see that he cares, right? So you're going to do things to sort of test that. What tends to happen to anxious attachment is that we get lost in the relationship. We start doing all the things that make him happy, or that we think will make him happy, or that you wish he'd do for you, and then he doesn't return the favor, and then we end up feeling like not enough. I'm not good enough. And that's sort of the pitfall, one of the traps. So things that you might be thinking in your head. If I show him how amazing I am, or, you know, try to be what I think he wants or what he suggested he might want, then he'll fall in love with me and he'll never leave me. Or if I could figure out what he wants, then he'll fall in love with me. And we do all this detective work to try to figure that out. Or we have this script like, I'm not good enough. Like, no one's going to love me. I'm going to be abandoned, or I am abandoned can be the script. I'm unlovable. No one's ever going to love me. I'm going to be alone forever. And then from that comes like, there's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? And then because anxious attachment needs somebody else to regulate, we aren't so good at regulating ourselves, we sort of get this feeling like, I can't do it without you, or I need you. And then the fear that I'm going to be alone forever, and I don't want to be alone. Towards the end, after many experiences of having our hearts broken, then we tend to start thinking like love and relationships just always end up disappointing and exhausting, and you can't depend on anyone, and maybe I just shouldn't do this. So some things that you'll be feeling if you've got this anxious attachment is sort of a roller coaster experience in relationships. So it's up when he's saying wonderful things for you and you feel secure, and down the minute you feel like the attachment or the connection is jeopardized in some way or in danger in some way and needing the reassurance right away. So you sort of go up and down with that, because you just need that constant reassurance and that I'm safe here. I'm safe with this person. I'm not going to be abandoned. So over time, what tends to happen is that if you're anxious attachment, you start to equate that feeling of anxiety that you always have in the pit of your stomach when you're dating someone with actually being love, or actually being passion or chemistry. And so you sort of have this preoccupation in your head about this person, this obsession, this like the uncertainty causes this like chemical rush. And what happens is that starts to be equated with, oh, this is what love is like. This is what love feels like. And that's actually just your attachment system on overdrive. It's because he matches your love blueprint, as we talked about before. So you'll find stable, secure men pretty uninteresting, boring. You'll say there's no chemistry, there's no spark. And essentially what's happened is that your attachment system is always activated, always feeling that anxiety, and it's gotten confused with what to look for, right? Because of your love blueprint. So this will cause you sometimes to be very emotional in relationship, quick to anger, quick to cry, not sure basically if I don't make a scene here, if I don't make myself seen and heard, then my needs aren't going to be met. And this comes from childhood. It's in the love blueprint. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So the anxious attachment's hunger for connection is based on the belief underneath all of that, that you actually can't get the connection that you want, and you cannot get that consistent love. You cannot have someone who stays. So we expect, if you're anxious attachment, to be let down, to be hurt, to be rejected at any moment. That's always under the surface in all the relationships. And this, of course, goes to the core wound and the whole system that you have around your love blueprint. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is that your choices and your behavior as an anxious attachment and the particular core wound and love blueprint that you have basically keeps recreating that in your experience, so that you're left and you are abandoned and you are the one who the guy leaves, and you are the one who feels like, I'm not enough because he left me and he found someone else. So what's happening is that it's just in your love blueprint that keeps recreating it, but it feels like truth because that is what tends to keep happening. So where does anxious attachment start? Typically it starts, like almost everything, in childhood, when we're very young. We as babies, we start to develop what's called object permanence, that something won't and can't just disappear. Even if you can't see it, it's still there. And so what happens with the babies who become or are just anxious attachment is that the caretaker provided inconsistent, your primary caretaker provided inconsistent or unreliable caregiving, which meant that you couldn't develop object permanence with them. And so you didn't know if they were going to show up or whether your needs were going to be met. And so it was always this constant anxiety and uncertainty. And so this on and off kind of inconsistency created major anxiety, created feeling doubtful, created feeling insecure. And it's not that you didn't receive lots of love. Typically you did. It's just that it was sometimes unpredictable when you would. So often these children become sort of like caregivers for their caregivers, their primary caregivers. They were sort of given information that may have been inappropriate for them, like a confidant to one parent, to complain about the other parent. Or maybe there was no other parent in the picture, it's just one parent, and you sort of became your primary caretaker's like other person instead of a child. And so that became part of what happened. And then through this, you learned that the best way of receiving, or your best chance of receiving love and care that you actually wanted, was to give it first. So then you aimed to please and you gave because eventually you thought, I'll get it back. So what are the costs of this attachment type? So a lot of the dating advice that you'll see that relates to men and women is teaching women some version of playing hard to get, or playing a cool girl who isn't kind of ruffled by anything, not being needy, not being demanding, basically being, sometimes it's called like a high value woman. This is a problem for anxious attachment. And I'll get to that in a minute. But what the books will say is they'll say things like, if he asks you out on a Wednesday, and it's, for a Friday, that's like, he didn't like think about you earlier in the week, so you should say no. You should be sending the message that you're busy, that your schedule's full, that you're a high value, right? Like these sorts of things. And it's meant to then create him to chase you. Talk about like what's not working there for you. One of the problems is that you cannot keep up the act that you actually like are not feeling insecure, or not feeling like I need you to like be there, really be there, right? What you're actually feeling is going to come out sooner or later. So I remember I dated a guy who told me on our first date, on that first night, how important his independence was to him, but I'd already fallen for him that night. So I decided, because anxious attachment, like, who do I need to be so he'll like me, that I was going to show him that like I was totally independent too, and like he didn't need to worry about his independence, which is total BS, first of all, because a relationship does take away your freedom to do whatever, whenever, with whomever, right? That's like, because it's a relationship. But back then, I was still thinking of all that kind of advice. So I tried to be this cool girl with my own busy, full life, which it was. And I tried really hard not to scare him away by like wanting too much or needing too much, because I sensed that I could, and also had that abandonment wound. And then when he delayed a date one night, and I was already at a friend's house. I was constantly checking my phone for his message for when he'd say he was off work. And then he messages, oh, hey, like, it's really crazy. I'm not going to make it there right away. And, I was like, okay, so is he going to reschedule? Is he going to come later? Like, no response. And I could not enjoy being at my friend's house because I wanted to be with him because he was everything. I wanted to be with him. And I couldn't not want that, right? So I was sitting there, not able to really be present in the moment. And I filled my social calendar because that's the advice, be busy, have a busy schedule. It doesn't work for anxious attachment because there was one person I wanted to be with, and that was him. And I did not feel secure in that dating relationship. So I remember that, like, so at some point at that night, because he hadn't responded, I ended up like sending some snarky, maybe slightly clingy kind of message when he delayed and then had canceled. And what I was sure later on was that, like, that piece in me, that part of me, was what had pushed him away because I wanted too much and I couldn't keep up the game. So trying to do this is just, you can't keep up the game, right? And you're creating this crazy roller coaster scenario for yourself to try to be somebody that you're not feeling like. So the kind of men that this advice is for is actually for if you were dating an avoidant type man, right? Because you will probably drive him away, or he just won't be able to meet those needs. So basically, avoidant men are your kryptonite because they're the match for the way that you think your blueprint is, that love is not reliable, love is not consistent. You can't be sure it's going to be there, right? So he fits that perfectly. He's like your kryptonite. He's never going to make you feel secure. He'll love that you're low maintenance and don't need him around a lot and don't need assurances from him and don't need a label on the relationship, etc., etc., etc. But that's not what you actually want. So something else to watch out for, in addition to this, which is just the dating advice that doesn't work for anxious types because it just further creates that anxiety, further creates that whole situation. So something else to watch out for is that needing others to regulate you, which is what the avoidant type is kind of like, that's like the key to the avoidant type, is that you are not able to in yourself regulate as well. And so that's why we're always looking to our partners, needing their reassurance, needing them to help regulate when we feel deregulated. And this means that we end up being hyper-focused on others and actually abandoning the self because it's the other that's going to make us feel good. That's the way it works. So always focused outside of you. And what happens then is we lose ourselves in that person. We can not stand up for what we need to stand up for. We cannot create boundaries that we need to create. We cannot communicate the things that we need to create. We can try to be something for them because that's where we are seeking. We're seeking outside of ourselves. So what this is really, it's a journey back to yourself and all the parts that need healing and love and validation and attention, and learning how to self-regulate and be in relationship and be in communication with others. But that piece is so important before we can do anything with anyone else and be effective at that. So we need to know what is a red flag and what's a wound talking or an activated attachment system talking, because that can be very confusing and hard to tell the difference between. Knowing, is he a no? Or are you blind to all the ways he's actually a yes? Because where is the line between what he needs to do for you and what you need to do for yourself? Because at the end of the day, we can't expect others to be there for us all the time, 24/7, because they all have their own needs. They have their own stuff to work out. They have their own woundings. They have their own parts that they haven't been able to deal with. And sometimes we trigger them with our parts. And so you need to know, where is the line from what you need for a partner and what you need to be able to do and give for yourself. And be honest with yourself about, is he up for the task of what I actually would like and want? Because we often attach to someone before we see if they actually are. And then it is so hard, so hard to let go. because of all those other things I've talked about. So I had to be honest that I couldn't do that anxious avoidant dance anymore, but that wasn't honestly enough, because I could be like, this isn't working, but then who am I still attracted to? So I think I've said before, but I'm sometimes anxious, I'm sometimes avoidant, I'm actually like walking the line between them. And this can flip, and you may experience this too, that depending on where your partner is in the spectrum, you may appear more anxious or you may appear more avoidant compared to them because of where you two line up. But when I was with a severely anxious attached partner, I appeared extremely avoidant, because being with somebody who needed so much from me was very, very draining for me. And trying to give him what he was asking for to make him feel safe never felt like it was enough. It felt like it was a bottomless pit that I was like trying to fill. And it was so difficult to be part of that for me. So I think this is important awareness as an anxious attachment, that others cannot be our source of happiness. We have to be that for ourselves. We have to be able to do that for ourselves, which means we have to do that healing work for ourselves. We have to go into the places we don't even know where to look. We don't even really see. We don't even know they're there. There are blind spots, which is what I help my clients do, because it's not fair to ask a partner to be all those things for all of the parts of us. So some tips. So first of all, it is important to know that your needs are valid. You do have needs that you need to have met by someone. And so when do you say this is okay? And when do you say this person literally just cannot meet something that is fundamental to what I need? And if I don't get this from this person, from a person, someone who's going to be in that role for me, then I actually cannot be all of me for the rest of my life. And the important thing here, of course, is that you've got to know what is the difference between an activated wound, your love blueprint, and what is actually like, this is what is real. This is what I really need, because some of those things are things to heal, right? So you have to be in touch with yourself, who you are, what you need, what you want. And you don't believe in that love is like the in love feeling that we tend to look for. We're looking for that high feeling, right? That's like your attachment system being like, this person's actually dangerous. Like, they're activating my anxiety right now because they're a match, probably avoidant, right? So watching out for not just falling immediately, but actually watching him, and what does he do? Can he actually fulfill these needs? Can he actually be there for me? Or am I falling in love prematurely, right? Of course, because then when we do that, we start acting sort of quote unquote crazy because we've got this activated attachment system. The other really important thing to do is to work on being in the present moment, getting into the present moment, because that's where you can start to regulate your attachment system. If you're anxious attachment, you tend to dwell a lot in the past, right? Like mistakes that you've made, things that you think you shouldn't have done or did do. Trying to overanalyze what's happened. So working on trying to be here in the present is very important work, and it helps you calm down your nervous system in the moment when it starts to be activated. So, of course, the process or the work that I do with clients is sort of what's in your love blueprint. We want to know that first. We want to sort of work on remapping that then, so that we're not calling in those same situations and same partners again and again and again, which just reinforce what we're already believing is true for us, or true for love, or true for what's possible. And this is also how it helps my clients so quickly. So something that somebody in the group asked was, or said like something like, I've done therapy, I've been doing it for years, doesn't seem to have made the difference for me in terms of this. So what I would say is, it's not like therapy. I've heard from so many clients that they've spent years in therapy and they're like, either it made it worse or it gave them awareness, which is the one I usually hear, but they weren't actually able to shift anything or remove the triggers or actually heal those wounds. It didn't actually create the transformation for themselves, or did it not without like a long, long, long time, and still they're like, I'm sort of stuck here. So that's sort of the difference. So when they come to me, they say like, I know what my issues are and I don't know what to do about it. Like, nothing I've tried has worked. I just have sort of like band-aids for things. So, or like I have awareness of my problems, but like still the same problems. So while awareness is the first step, and I talk about this quite a bit, information, that's awareness. Information is not transformation. There's still more to do, right? So that's where the blind spots come in. That's where what we cannot see that's there is there. That's where we actually have to work with what's in the love blueprint, what's in the core wounds. So when we work with the love blueprint, then we work with the whole belief system. We work with self-esteem, self-love, self-beliefs, the nervous system, and the brain, because the nervous system and the brain are connected, right? That's your attachment system. And if you have that low level, like pervasive anxiety, which is typical for anxious attachment, notice the word anxious, that's your activated attachment system, just pretty much always activated because of that anxiousness, that nervousness. I've had clients come to me and completely stop needing anxiety medication after working with me, which is crazy, but that's how it works. And of course, the most important work we do is with the parts that actually need healing and reintegration. And we do that with the core wound as well, because that's the huge, huge thing. That's sort of the underpinning between everything else that we're experiencing. So you don't need to know what it is. I help you find it. That's my magic. That's what we work with to then clear. I wasn't able to heal my attraction to men who would leave, unavailable men, and the belief that men would leave until I healed where it came from, which was in my core wound. So I think I've talked about this before, but my dad died when I was 5. I thought it never affected me. You know, I was like, oh, fine, like that happened. Yep, didn't impact me. And I'm like going around recreating a situation where men I choose are leaving me. And I was falling for all these men who would leave me. And that was in my love blueprint. And I just kept proving that right, basically. So doing the work on the core wound and the parts and the inner child and learning to self-regulate, nervous system, all those things, there's so many pieces that sort of go with this. So it's not fair to put your partner on the job of like regulating all of that for you, because you need to be able to do that for yourself as well. And it gets easier over time with the method I coach on, but you can rewire the patterning, you can rewire your nervous system, you can clear out all the stuff that's there. So that's something that you should shoot me a message if you're interested in doing this work with me. We can talk about working together. I have a few spots available still this month, filling up though. So anyways, message me.